You're someone who's helped tons of students land VC and investment jobs due to your amazing training during their time in uni. And now you're a partner at University Growth Fund, a 90 million fund. Peter, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Joe.
Let's go back to the start of your journey. What was your first real exposure to venture capital? Was it when you were still in college?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really know what venture capital was until I was in college, but I think my first real foray into entrepreneurship and venture capital, or not really venture capital, but investing was growing up in high school. I really wanted to be an engineer, in large part because my dad was an engineer. And he quit his job at Lockheed Martin, really prestigious defense contractor, and decided that he was going to do real estate investing. And so that kind of got me involved with him. I did a lot of real estate investing alongside him when I was in high school, which basically amounted to driving around, looking at dumpy properties, trying to find which ones we could fix up, and then spending my summers learning how to do electrical and laying floors and pipes and all kinds of stuff, which was great. It also like spurred within me this desire to not necessarily be an entrepreneur or not necessarily be an engineer to solve problems, but to be an entrepreneur and solve problems that way. So when I got to school, I was really primed for entrepreneurship and startups, and was even working on a startup very similar to Redbox here in the US before Redbox launched. And it was then that I found out about venture capital. And University Venture Fund, because a friend of mine told me about it, and he was like, you seem like somebody who would really, really like this and do well at it. So I applied, I got in, and started working on deals, and immediately just fell in love with kind of all aspects of venture capital. And that's really what kind of started my whole career.
And it's like even in your early ages, your childhood, you really surrounded yourself with how like money really works, how people actually works. Because all these real estate stuff, it's like not only do you have to know the finance side of things, but you've actually got to talk to those sellers and actually convince them like, hey, like actually sell me this and actually give me like a really, really good price on it. And I really respect your dad for bringing you into the real estate industry just because it's like really hard, like you said, to leave a really good job at like Raytheon and then just like start his own venture in a way where he's like, you know what, I'm gonna bring my entire family to it. I'm gonna make sure that they actually learn how like money works because this world is run by money in a way, especially in the US because we're capitalistic. But it's like you really got this really good foundation when you were younger. I know we also had a previous guest called Rex, and he has done something similar to you where he was also a missionary. Could you talk about how that part of your life also contributed to your success as a VC?
Well, I spent 2 years after high school as a missionary for my church in the Canary Islands in Spain. It was, frankly, my first time being alone, uh, or at least away from my parents, because you have a missionary companion that you work with. But yeah, it taught me a lot of things. One, it helped me develop more self-independence, which was super important. Also, it got me outside of my comfort zone because I'm naturally a little more introverted. But as a missionary, you have to go out and talk to complete strangers about one of the most difficult topics to have in any conversation, being religion, and do that every single day and get rejected nonstop. And so kind of helped me build resilience, but also get out of my shell and learn how to talk to people and engage with people. And so that was super valuable. I think the other thing that was really valuable to me was I knew before going on my mission that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. But while I was on my mission, I engaged with a lot of people that were poor, that were really struggling. And it was there that, it kind of spurred within me this desire to use business as a way to solve different societal issues and help people out of poverty and so forth, which has really been kind of a main driver behind the rest of my career. Not only, in venture capital, that may not sound like it's necessarily relevant, but in my job as at University Growth Fund, what I love about it is that we are using a very capitalistic model to enact incredible change in the lives of their students in our program. We have students that are, first generation college students. Some of them used to be homeless, all kinds of stories. And we're helping these students not only like land jobs, but land some of the most prestigious jobs in the country after going through our program and seeing massive increases in their income and livelihood and so forth. And so, I think that's also just always been a big driver of me behind what I do is trying to find ways to leverage business as a tool and capital as a tool to enact positive change in the world.
And I can see that journey in that thesis that you really have. And it seems like you really hold that thesis dear to your heart, where it's like, when you were a missionary, you started out thinking, I'm going to become an entrepreneur. But then, you went and saw like how much people were suffering. And you're like, I want to help all of these people. Like, I want to help as much people as I can. And, maybe being an entrepreneur can help, but being like a venture capitalist or being like someone who really advises and supports the businesses that really can drive this mission home or communities that can drive this mission home, that is where you want to be. And you've really shown that through your journey. When you started in venture capital, you taught tons of students, you trained tons of students. So could you talk about the journey from when you kind of started that venture capital, as when you were a student all the way to right now?
Sure. So I joined University Venture Fund when I was in college. And shortly after I joined, the two principals of the fund that had started the fund left to go pursue other business interests. And they brought in a gentleman who's now my business partner, Tom Stringham. And he and I worked closely to revamp soup to nuts, the whole fund operations. How do we recruit, train, mentor students? How do we source deals? How do we perform due diligence on deals? How do we make investment decisions? How do we support our portfolio companies? Kind of all those pieces. Worked on that as a student because when we went through that transition, there was a bit of a reset to the entire organization. So did that, was fortunate enough to be brought on full time in 2009, basically to keep doing all the work I had been doing and to build on it. Was there for another 6 years, so 8 in total, 2 as a student and 6 full time. And then in 2015, we decided to spin out of University Venture Fund and start our own firm, University Growth Fund. That was largely driven because venture funds last about 10 years before you really need to have another fund up and running before the end of those 10 years. And that organization had a board, and that board really wanted to do impact investing, which we weren't necessarily opposed to, but we wanted to keep doing traditional tech investing as well. And so we all agreed to amicably part ways. So they went and launched a new fund, an impact fund under University Venture Fund. And Tom and I spun out and launched University Growth Fund, which ended up being our first fund was about $32 million, and started making investments in tech companies. Our very first deal was in Lyft, the rideshare company. And then we were fortunate enough to invest in a bunch of other really great companies, like Pinterest and Spotify and so forth. And then in 2020, in February, it was great timing. We decided to go to market for Fund 2. And we were fortunate enough that we were able to get to a first close on the fund in April of 2020 and start deploying capital into some great companies. And so, yeah, we're currently deploying out of that fund, which is a $56 million fund. We now have, we started with just an office in Salt Lake City at University Venture Fund. In the middle of Fund 1, we opened up an office in San Diego to impact more students in that market. And then in 2021, we opened an office in Atlanta as a way to help more diverse students get access to the world of venture capital. And that's kind of where we are today.
Yeah, and you really undersold on like how great of an investments you really made. Because during like your time at university venture fund, like you made 12 investments, but then two of them IPO'd and also like four of them got acquired. So like that's freaking amazing, dude. Like, that usually doesn't happen in like any venture fund. And even though like when you were raising funds, I guess like your second fund, it was kind of great because that time everyone wanted to put money into venture capital. So then you also had like really great success on timing when to raise money, which is freaking amazing. I know that you've trained tons of students and you've seen like them really grow up, get VC jobs. Could you talk about who is VC not for?
I mean, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what venture capital is and isn't. So a lot of people think that in order to be a successful venture capitalist, you have to be able to build Excel models and do financial analysis. And that really that's what the job is all about, is analyzing these businesses and their financials. And the reality is that, yes, that is an important aspect of being an investor, any investor, frankly. It's kind of table stakes to be an investor, is the ability to understand kind of business models and flows of cash. But the thing that I think is the most interesting about venture capital is that that aspect of it is actually a relatively small part of it, especially if the earlier you go, because they just don't have any financials really for you to go off of. You can look at like forecasts to understand a business model, but that's about all it really tells you. And so there's all of these like more intangible things that really matter, all this qualitative stuff. Like you need to understand the market, you need to understand the pain point that customers are facing in that market. You need to understand the people that are building the product and assess whether or not they are the right people to build the right product for these customers to solve their pain point. Do they have the ability to then scale the business, right? There's all of these assessments that you need to do on people, and like there's psychology involved in it. There is a certain amount of kind of creativity and art around how do you structure a deal in such a way that everybody is incentivized to win. And then, a lot of the stuff that we're investing in is cutting edge, right? And so you have to constantly be learning about the latest technologies and business models and approaches in your space. And so if you're not someone who's like intellectually curious, this is probably not a good fit. If you don't enjoy working with people and getting outside of your comfort zone, maybe, and having conversations with lots of people, this is maybe not a great fit because, it's like I was talking to a friend of mine, another VC. Venture capital is very much like a people game. You want to get into the very best deals. And in order to get into the best deals, you have to convince the very best entrepreneurs that they should take your capital versus somebody else's capital, because the capital itself is fungible, and the relationships are the thing that really differentiates. So you got to be thinking about like, is that the route you want to go, and also are you comfortable taking on a lot of risk, because there's just so much uncertainty in this job. I mean, I think about it in terms of it. There's not a tremendous amount of huge stress necessarily, because you do have a portfolio of companies. So even when one is struggling, like another one might be performing well. But there is always this underlying kind of low grade stress in the back of your mind, right? And that you just don't know where things are going to ultimately pan out. And you can hope, but I've even seen deals where the company was going to the moon and then overnight imploded and went under. And so you just kind of have to have a lot of risk tolerance as well. So yeah, I mean, those are some of the things that I'd be thinking about. Like, do those align with your personality if you're someone that's considering working in venture capital? If you're the kind of person that really needs a lot of direction on what to do, then this is probably not like a great fit. But if you're a little more entrepreneurial and curious and like engaging with people, then learning about technology and taking on risk, then this could be a really interesting career for you.
Yeah, and it's really risky where it's like your investments, maybe even 90% of them just like straight up fails and then loses everything. But then if one investment returns, your fund, then that's really all you need. And then if you have like a couple more acquisitions from your investment portfolio, then heck, that's great. You reach your IRR and DPI. And it's just like, it's really risky where in the independent side, like Peter says, you have to keep on learning and not really much people is just going to guide you. You have to do things yourself. You have to put in the work. But then on the other side, it's not really independent where you have to talk to tons of people and you have to love, talking to people because venture capital is a people's game where if you want to convince the best founders, you need to use something more than just your brand. Like if you're not in Sequoia or A16Z, then how are you going to convince those founders that you are the right fit, the right partner for them? Because this is a long road. It could be 10 years, it could be 15 years that the startup is just like taking so long to grow. Or it could be like a rocket ship, like Peter says, just like overnight and then just shoots the moon. But it's like you never know, and it's very, very risky. So, venture capital, it's like you just have to put in the work, love people, and just love the experience. What mentorship style would you say is the best for students? Because you mentioned, there shouldn't be too much guidance. It's really, the students have to put in their work. When you're training college students and you have tons of active members, how do you train them? Like, what is the curriculum?
So we have a fairly robust training program that we put students through. But I would say like the heart of it is really twofold. One is I don't sit down and teach people like do A, do B, do C. Instead, I try and teach them like foundational principles that they can use to evaluate companies and investment opportunities. And so we spend a lot of time talking about um, you know, different business strategies, different ways to create competitive moats. We talk about different ways to assess a market, different ways to think about competition. The other big piece that I think is super important, though, is you got to take those principles and you need to put them in practice, and you need to put them in practice a lot of times. Reps. We talk a lot about reps, getting lots of reps in at University Growth Fund. And that just means working on a lot of deals, because the more deals you work on, the better you will get at becoming an investor, at identifying like things that really matter and things that don't matter in a deal. And that really only comes from experience on working on live deals. And so, well, we do have a robust training program. Really, the core learning of what we do happens actually working on live deals. And in my opinion, like it's not just college students. I think that's the best way to learn. Get real experience and get lots of, opportunities to shoot on goal, if you will, because that's where you learn a lot and also where you build real tangible skills.
Yeah, and I completely agree. It's like whenever I want to do something and I really wanted it, then I would just go straight to the source of it. And by the source, what I mean is not just like learning about stuff online, but like actually putting it into practice, really doing that hands-on aspect. And heck, even if you're not like a official investor or representing an investment firm, you can really just like go and talk to founders and then really develop that eye. You mentioned that the growing and the learning really happens in hands-on. What should, let's say, you're not an investor and
Mhm.
you want to develop it by going to events, talking to the founders, how could you develop like a similar skill and training where your investor eye, like you can sense whether the deal or the founder is actually a great fit?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways to do that. The big one is like just go out and talk to founders, right? Learn about their business. Most founders are super passionate about what they're doing and they're excited to share it with people. And then, think about like there's a lot of people that will write analyses on startups that they think are interesting or on industries or markets. And, by writing that up and maybe publishing it, right, is a way to kind of force yourself to think critically about it. You're making an investment of your time, but also you're, risking your credibility by putting it out there. And so it can, in some ways, mimic being an investor. And it also allows you to kind of put your name out there, put your brand out there, put your thinking out there, right, for other people to read, comment, push back, and engage with you on, which, can help solidify you as somebody that's kind of in the know, right? And then, I think there's also an element of closing the loop. So, one of the things that I recommend to a lot of people if they want to work in venture is find ways to add value to venture funds. And one of the ways in which you can do that is by sourcing interesting investment opportunities. So that's how you close the loop, right? You meet a founder, you hear their pitch, you decide whether or not you think it is a good opportunity. You draft up, an analysis of it, and then you share that with a VC with an option of making an intro. If the VC gets excited about it, like that's your feedback loop, right? That's where that you've maybe found something really interesting. If they're not interested in it, that's also like helpful information to come back to you so you can refine and improve, right? And oftentimes the VCs will tell you why it's not interesting, right? Which is another way to get basically free learning from incredibly smart people who have been working in industry for a long time.
And that thing right there that you mentioned, you don't actually have to be in a fund. You can kind of be sort of a independent scout, like not even like a direct scout, but you could be like scouting investments for yourself in these events when you're talking to founders, and then really just like send like, hey, this is my investment memo on this startup. I think it's great. Reasons why. Startup memos, there is like a ton of guides online on how to do it, but really just like look over it and then create your own startup memo, send it to those funds. And this is the important part that Peter mentions, send it to the funds. And if the VCs like it, then that's your feedback loop. Like you don't have to wait like 2 years until you finally see that, oh, so this startup actually turned out well. Like you don't really have to do that. If you want to get immediate feedback, that's kind of how you do it. If the VCs are interested in it, then bam, that's how you get like really, really good investor eye, where you're developing something that the VC who has done it for years and years is kind of just like helping you indirectly. Talk about how, when students apply to your university growth fund, talk about like what types of people you kind of accept. Is there background experience or is there any typical resume that would really land them a chance to work with you and the fund members? Or is it really just like anyone when people is applying to applications for VC funds?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we have offices in Salt Lake City, San Diego, and Atlanta, like I mentioned earlier. In order to be able to participate in a program, you need to be a full-time student at a university in one of those regions within driving distance of our office there. So that's criteria one. You also, obviously need to be a full-time student, right, as part of that. The other things that we look for, though, are pretty open and broad. So we take students from any major. Ideally, they need to have at least 2 semesters before they graduate, minimum. And really, we like students that have about 4 semesters before they graduate. Um, we take students from engineering and business and humanities, like really don't care what major you're coming from. And in fact, we like students that aren't just purely business students because we feel like it brings kind of unique perspective and interests. And we also take grad students and law students and doctoral, doctors and so on and so forth. So really flexible there. In terms of background experience, we're not necessarily looking for people that come with a lot of venture capital experience already. It's really hard to get good venture capital experience, and that's why we exist. So it wouldn't do much good if we required our students to have it before they come. So what do we do? What do we look for? We look for students that are really passionate about something related to what we do. So that could be they're super passionate about tech entrepreneurship, or they're super passionate about investing broadly, or they could be super passionate about venture capital investing specifically, but it needs to be, or they could be super interested in just technology in general, right? But they need to be able to demonstrate to us that they have real passion, because like sometimes it's a grind, it's a lot of work within our firm. And we want people that are excited and enjoy the work, not people that are, going to find it a drudgery, right? Also, it's like that saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. I have a lot of confidence in our program and its efficacy at helping students achieve great things, but I can't really force it, right? Students need to come in and they need to be excited and they need to take advantage of all the opportunities that we provide, as it's not something that we force. And then, the other two things we look for are people that are really smart, because you have to get up the learning curve quick on a lot of different industries and it's constantly changing and evolving, and you got to learn. You got to be able to learn quickly. There's a lot of ways to be smart, so it's not just a matter of having a strong GPA, although I, unlike a lot of people, do believe GPAs matter. My quick side tangent on that is, if you think about your GPA, it's the amalgamation of a lot of professors who are quote unquote experts in their space evaluating, your competency in that area, right? Aggregated. So I think there's actually a tremendous amount of information in a GPA to unpack. So we do care about it, but it's not the only factor. So for applicants, demonstrate to us, if you're not book smart, demonstrate to us how you are smart, maybe street smart or creativity or whatever it might be. And then the last piece we look for are people that are great to work with. Everything we do is in teams. Like we've talked about already, venture capital is a people person game. And so, we look for people that are great team members. They're fun to be around. They get their stuff done on time. You can trust and depend on them. And honestly, if you have those three things, right? Deep passion, you're sharp, and you're a great team player. Like we're very interested in working with you. And we have a lot of confidence now, having done this for the last 16 years, in our ability to help anybody that brings those three characteristics to the table with the ability to exit our program as a really great investor and be well teed up for the rest of their career.
Even though, you might not have too much venture capital experience or not even in the same major as business, like you can get into venture capital. That's the great thing about venture capital, where people come from like all sorts of paths. They can become like a specialist and then they transition to venture capital. Could you talk about maybe like some success stories of like this student's background and then now they became a VC and what really made them unique?
We have this one student who frankly did not have the best grades, but he was really, really passionate and really wanted to work with us. And so, we let him in, and like part of his interview frankly was rough, but he was just really passionate, brought a lot of energy, and was like, look, I definitely like did not do the very best on this analysis. He's like, I tried my hardest. I don't know enough, but I will learn it, and I will work really, really hard. So, we brought him in. It was a little bit of a gift, honestly. Sometimes we give gifts, and he worked really, really hard. And what we realized about him was that like he just hustles like no other, and he's got no fear. And so even though he never became like the most exceptional student in our program at like building financial models or what have you, he worked really hard at building that skill set. And when he left our firm, he went and started working and doing biz dev for a valuations firm. So this firm does 409A valuations that companies need to have done in order to set the prices on their options that they pay out to employees. And a biz dev role basically means he works sales. So his job was to go out and meet with startups and convince them to use this valuation firm services. And he was just tenacious about it. Like he was just unrelentless in meeting with these founders. And what that did is, we talked about how it's a people game, right? Well, he became really good at getting his foot in the door with all kinds of top tier startups. And then when it was able to parlay that into, hey, I have access to really great companies, and our valuation firm has really unique insight into how these things are priced and should be priced. And he ended up launching a venture fund with his partners in the valuation firm, taking that skill of sourcing clients for the valuation firm to sourcing portfolio investments for his venture fund has been really successful at that. So, I think that's like an interesting example of, even if you don't have, incredible Excel modeling skills, you can still go on to be a successful venture investor.
As long as you have the hustle. And
You
that's
have to
at the end
hustle.
of the day what really matters. Um, so let's say, a student really joins your university growth fund program. What would
Mhm.
be the timeline, as in like, because this would be applicable to like aspiring VCs as well. They can kind of try to replicate it, but what is like the timeline, as in like, hey, first few months, this student's going to do this, and then afterwards, they're going to do that, and then finally they're going to do live deals. What does that look like?
The typical path for our students is they join us during the summer, although we do recruit fall and spring semesters as well. We fly them out near the beginning of the semester, and we do a big group training with everybody in Salt Lake City. We cover, how to analyze markets, how funds are structured, how to build financial models, how to do basic valuation work, all of that stuff. So that happens the first week in the program, and then we go for an offsite, which is just a really fun activity that we do over the weekend. And then we staff up students on deals, live deals. Typically, they're going to get staffed up on anywhere from 2 to 4 deals on their first real day in our firm, and they'll be tasked with doing a section of the investment analysis. So you could be tasked with the market section or the competitive landscape section or building out the financial model or the exit returns, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, at that point, we may have periodic little trainings that occur and opportunities to learn more. But for the most part, students are just working on deals every day in, day out throughout the summer. And so yeah, that's really kind of the process.
And do they get like live feedback on the deals from their seniors, or is it from you? Like you can't be like doing all this yourself, right?
Yeah, so the way we've done it is students will get access to a data room with all of the materials about the company. They prep an outline, and then I go through the outline with the team and give them feedback on the outline to ensure that they're asking all the right questions. And then they'll work with a senior associate who is the team lead on the deal, somebody who's been with the fund for typically at least a year, can basically build an entire investment memo on their own. So they'll work as the team lead, and they'll provide a lot of guidance and feedback throughout the process. And then if the students still like the investment opportunity after going through all of the due diligence, they'll pitch it to the rest of the students. And so all of the other students have the opportunity to ask questions, push back, provide feedback, etc., and then vote on whether or not we take it to investment committee. At that point, I review all the materials, give additional feedback, polish up the documents, and then we go to our investment committee for final approval. And that's another, frankly, great opportunity for students to get real-time feedback on their analysis and their work, as the investment committee, peppers them with questions and tears apart their analysis as they try to get to a recommendation on whether or not we should move forward. So that's kind of the process and the ways in which we work in feedback and mentorship.
That's amazing. It's like, you kind of have a student who really just like starts right away. Like it's literally just like you get one small foundation type of big event, and then afterwards you literally have like 2 to 4 live deals for each student. So it's amazing how like if I was like a student at like one of the universities that you guys partner with, like I would get so much value from it. Where it's like day one I'm doing hands on, where it's like in other firms, maybe it's like some different tasks. It could be sourcing or something like that. But it's like you guys have a set program where you guys have people do hands on right away. And then they're kind of like a associate or analyst in a way where they have to pitch the students first, and afterwards they pitch another team, and then it goes to a final round of like investment committee. So you guys really have like a rigorous process where everyone is just like pitching each other to make sure that the deal actually goes through. Are you guys like leading deals or kind of just like partnering with other firms?
Yeah, so we don't lead deals. We only co-invest alongside other larger funds. And that's largely because we know who we are and who we're not, right? We're not Sequoia. And so if I have a choice between leading a deal in a subpar company or writing a small check alongside Sequoia, I'm going to take the latter because I think that's ultimately going to drive better returns for our investors, right? It's like the Groucho Marx comment where he's like, I wouldn't want to be a part of a club that would have me as a member. It's kind of like knowing yourself. And it's like if an entrepreneur is coming to us to lead their deal, it would make me really question like, is this a really high caliber, high quality founder? And so instead, what I'd rather do is as I meet founders that I think are really interesting and doing really interesting things, rather than fight to be the lead investor, I send it off to our partners and where they will lead it, and then we write a check alongside them.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, you guys have like around 60 active members and 3 offices. So expansion is amazing. And, you guys got really much coverage through the cities. How are you guys like spreading, your members out to really source these really, really great deals? And are they like each holding events themselves? What is that like to really just like increase university growth funds branding and reach?
So students aren't required to source. That's one of the things that makes us a little more unique relative to a lot of other venture capital internships. It's really execution work. So students are welcome to source if they want. And we have invested in deals where students have sourced the investment opportunity, but it's not a requirement or expectation within our firm. So most of the deal sourcing occurs through me and my business partner. And then we essentially hand the deal off to students after it comes in the door and let the students kind of run through all of the due diligence and deal execution side of it.
And when students, ask like, hey, could you give me recommendations of where to go to find founders? Because obviously, if you guys have tons of warm inbound, which is amazing, but the students would be like, hey, like I want to source as well. I want to meet founders. So when they ask you like, hey, where would I meet founders? What events do I go to? What do you tell them?
Every community has its community events and organizations. And so it's just encouraging them to find those and go to them. I would say, like, if I had like a criticism, most students, even within our program, don't go to events as much as they should. And I think it's a real big missed opportunity. Like, you should be going to as many events and meeting as many people as you can if this is a space you want to work in.
How much of the investor eye would you say is like really talking to the people? Because I know you mentioned the students are mostly focused on execution, which is like the largest part, but how much of it is like actually meeting the founder face to face and talking about like, their backstory and how their experiences are?
So we can't always talk to the founder because sometimes we're a very, very small check and a very, very big deal. But as often as we can, the students will spend time meeting with entrepreneurs either over Zoom or face to face and asking them lots of hard hitting questions about their business. So yeah, it's definitely a core part of what we do.
You've done tons of successful deals and you've know how to rise money from LPs. How do you maintain like these relationships with high net worth people and how do you find them?
Yeah, it's a good question. Honestly, it's a lot of meeting one person who introduces you to somebody else. So in fundraising, what I've realized is that, more important than pretty much everything, including your investment performance, is trust. Do they trust you? Like I've seen investors put money into funds with terrible performance because they trust the investors behind the fund and their ability to execute on the next fund and drive better returns. And so it's not about returns, it's about trust. And so in order to get trust with somebody you don't know, you basically need to borrow trust from somebody that does know you well and does trust you. And so a lot of it is, building relationships with some people and then leveraging those relationships to meet more people and leveraging their trust and reputation in order to start building and gain trust in a relationship with the new people that you're meeting, right?
And the insane part is that even if, like, for example, a VC's fund has like under returned, I've seen like LPs literally just like put money into their next fund, like regardless, just because of that relationship and of that trust. Like they're like, okay, it doesn't matter, you did bad like this time, but then I trust that you're gonna do well next time. And this happens like way more often than we would think. Even like I guess like maybe the relationships aren't that close, but LPs still do it for some reason. And I think it's like one of the most amazing parts about VC as well. Let's talk about trends in venture capital. What are you most excited about at University Growth Fund? You're focused on Series A to pre-IPO companies, from consumer products, consumer tech, semiconductors. What do you think is overlooked in the market right now?
That's a good question. I think AI has thrown so much up in the air that it's made it difficult, I think, to really predict where the future is going. A lot of people are placing bets and trying to figure out where things are going. There's a great debate happening right now of whether or not SaaS is dead, because if I can just vibe code whatever it is that I need to solve my problem, why would I shell out more money for something that's not customized to my exact needs, right? And that's only going to accelerate most likely and get better and easier to do. And so, I think about like where the big next opportunities probably are going to be in areas where companies can gain an advantage when it comes to marketing or distribution, as some people call it. I think about distribution as more like getting the product to the person, and marketing is actually convincing them, sales and marketing convincing them that they need your product. And, if you think about all businesses break down into three main components, it's making a product, getting a product in people's awareness and desires to have it, and then getting the product to them. And the internet makes it free to get product to people. And now AI makes it basically free to build product. So the last big thing that's not free, that's going to become increasingly more difficult and more expensive, is convincing people, well, one, letting them know you even exist, and then two, convincing them to use your product, right? And so I think a lot about like what are different ways in which that could happen. One way, a friend of mine, for example, is backing a startup that's really focused on B2B influencers. So not B2C, which is what the vast majority of influencers are today, but B2C, because he believes that, and I think he's right, that curation will become an important part of kind of distinguishing value and identifying really great products and startups going forward. And so there's an opportunity to provide picks and shovels to the people, the B2B influencers that are out there that are curating and being the tastemakers of what products are actually compelling and interesting, right? So I think that's pretty interesting. I think there's other things that will be just they're going to be really hard for AI to solve for. So you can build an app, but can you build one that's scalable to a billion people? Vibe coding, probably not, right? That requires a very good understanding of a lot of different moving pieces. And so, I think there will be opportunities for companies that are providing like very robust infrastructure and then allowing you to personalize on top of that using AI. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's kind of it's a wild time right now. I've been thinking a lot, and I'll probably do a post on this, that what's tricky about venture capital today that's never really happened before is that there's so much noise, and the signal that you used to have to help you cut through the noise is actually now more noise. So for example, there are a lot of AI startups that have gone from like 0 to 10 million in ARR in a year. which is like insane growth, right? Like you never see that. Normally that would be signal, right? That'd be like, wow, this company is solving like a massive pain point and they're going to end up becoming like an insanely valuable company someday. But the reality is that they just might have vibe coded something that solves some pain point and they were kind of the first there. But pretty soon there's going to be like a zillion competitors that have basically the same product that are going to compete with them, and their marketing costs are going to explode and growth is going to like die off, right? And so like that signal that used to exist is now just a bunch of noise. And so you got to cut through like things like revenue and adoption, engagement, and some of these metrics that used to be like you could really anchor on as strong signals for a company, and you got to figure out what the new things are for that business, which I think is really challenging and something that everyone's kind of trying to figure out whether or not they admit it to themselves or not.
Yeah, and it's like 5 years ago, it was really predictable where if it was a SaaS business, as long as they got from like 0 to 10 million AR, you would literally just write the check and you would not even like talk to the founders because you know they're doing so freaking well. But then nowadays, it's like there's just like so much noise that it's evolving so quick. The signals aren't there anymore, as in like there's just so much signals, like you said, that people don't even know what to do. So partners in the VC funds right now, they kind of have it harder. And back then, VCs actually had it easier, where it was a lot more predictable, a lot more stable signals. So like Peter says, for entrepreneurs, if they're trying to build something, it can't be anything like really general anymore. It's got to be like really high infrastructure, where it's like, for example, like enterprise companies, they have like tons and tons of infrastructure that if we use AI to really bond that together or make that more efficient, then that is like $1 billion company. But then right now, the best way for people to really even learn about AI is, I know Peter has posted something about AI custom AI custom, where if you really experiment with that, even if you're in a like a job right now, heck, you can really speed up the efficiency of the process of your workplace and really just get this head start on what AIs are, what LLMs are, and literally everything like that, so you can stay on top of the trends. So I know that VC industry is changing as well, the VC traditional model. What is here to stay in the next 5 years for aspiring VCs who wants to join like a VC firm?
Yeah, I mean, I think here's some of the challenges, right? AI is going to displace a lot of the work that an analyst or an associate would have done historically on the due diligence execution side. It's also going to significantly augment venture funds' ability to do deal sourcing and outreach and so forth. I think there's, if I was a student, like where are the opportunities that aren't going to be disrupted by I think a lot of it is just your ability to think critically and to ask the AI the right questions. I think there's also an element of like AI will drive down the cost of fund creation. And so there will be more opportunities for people that are ambitious, that want to go out and hustle, to find interesting investment opportunities and start building a track record. You've got, it's an incredible time to be thinking about venture capital. Like you can invest in companies for as little as $100 on platforms like WeFunder and Start Engine and Republic, um, and start building a track record there. Like, I mean, heck, if you are super passionate about a company, go to that company, convince them that they should raise on WeFunder. WeFunder and a lot of these platforms will pay you a commission if you bring a startup to them. They'll pay upwards, like in some cases, like thousands of dollars. So go find a company you're super passionate about, convince them that they should do an equity crowdfunding raise, get them to do that, and then you'll get paid a couple $1,000s, and you can take that couple $1,000s and you can invest it into that exact same startup. And therefore, like thereby, like you can create a track record without any money of your own, which, I just think is like super cool. You couldn't do that. When I started in the industry, we talked a lot about like zombie funds and stuff because there had been like almost 1,000 venture funds raised leading up to the dot-com burst. And then afterwards, about half of them like couldn't raise another fund and went out of business. And so the entire industry was shrinking. It was really hard to get into venture because nobody was hiring and a lot of people getting laid off. And now it's like you can spin up an SPV, you can invest through equity crowdfunding, like there's a zillion different opportunities for people to invest in this asset class, which is a large reason why I launched my YouTube channel, VCP, was because I felt like we lived in an unprecedented time of opportunity as it relates to venture capital investing. And yet there weren't a lot of resources, particularly for like people just entering the field to understand how venture capital works and what it is and how to do it, especially when you compare it to things like real estate and options trading and cryptocurrencies, right? And so that was really my goal, is to take the things that I've learned over the last 15 to 16 years and share those things with people that are interested in getting access to this asset class.
And for our audience, VCP is Venture Capital Podcast. That is what you search on YouTube. And, I've been a follower of the YouTube channel for a long time. And I just like see like how great it is. The foundation that it really helps you build is like so, so solid. Like if I was like a university student, just like who wants to break into VC, I would literally just like use that channel and watch like all the videos to build my foundation on VC. And then the other part would just be like going to events and talking to founders. And that's really all you need. I know Peter talked a bit about how to break into VC. For our college students, what would be a 6-month plan that is actionable to break into VC?
Yeah. So the way I would approach it is, first of all, figure out the lay of your land. And what I mean by that is, do you want to get a job locally to where you are? Do you want to get a job? Maybe you don't care where it is geographically, but you really care about a sector. But you kind of need to narrow down to a specific market, if you will, that you want to approach. So, for example, I have one student that he's just really passionate about defense tech, rocket ships, that sort of thing. So he focused on that industry. He didn't really, there's nothing, no funds in Utah where he was living at the time that did that sort of thing. So the downside was that he had to travel quite a bit to meet funds and entrepreneurs and so forth in that space. But that's what he was passionate about. If you're less passionate about a specific sector because you're young and you just don't know what you don't know yet and you just want to get exposure, then maybe you focus on like what's in your backyard, right? What's in your region. And if you're living in a place that doesn't have much, then you either need to start networking outside of that, or frankly, you need to move and go to where the people are. So that's the first thing I would do, is just get a lay of the land. Who are all the different venture funds? Who are the movers and shakers? What are their areas of focus and expertise? All those types of things. And then I would spend time, I would probably invest in getting a coach, and they can help you refine your resume and kind of prep for some interviews. In the beginning, you're just going to do like informational interviews. So what you do is you get a lay of the land, then you get kind of your story refined, your resume buttoned up so that you can come off as somebody that is impressive and worth meeting. And then you reach out to as many people as will talk to you in the industry. Venture capitalists, service providers is another good one that I think that's undertapped, like startup lawyers, accountants, like outsourced CFO shops. There's a bunch of different service providers to startups and to venture capital. And so building relationships with those people through informational interviews, right, can be really helpful because they can then make introductions, warm introductions, which is really what like the currency of this industry, to other industry experts or to other VCs and so forth. So then I would just get out there, start meeting with people. And your goal in these meetings is not to land an internship as much as it is to start building a relationship, to understand what the key pain points are of that individual and then see if there are ways that you can solve them. In economics, which I studied when I was an undergrad, there's this idea of comparative advantage. So in the idea of comparative advantage, it's like, why do two countries trade a given good if one country is better at producing both goods than the other country? And that's because like time is a limited resource, and so one country can trade to the benefit of both even if they're worse at producing it, even if it's more costly, because it allows the other country to focus on the thing they're good at, right? So in a similar vein, you may think like, I'm not very good at sourcing deals compared to this VC, and I'm not very good at evaluating investment opportunities and all of these things. Like, what would I really have to offer? And the thing that you probably have to offer that the VC does not is time. And so you can dig in, and even if it takes you twice as long, or three times, or five times as long to do the same amount of work, you typically probably have that time as a college student that the VC does not. And so you can leverage that as a way to drive value back to that relationship. So figure out like, what are the things that the VC is looking like, what their pain points are. Usually it really boils down to three things. It's either deal sourcing, it's raising money from investors, or it's supporting their current portfolio companies. So if you can tease that out during, what would be helpful, and then when you reach out, you're just constantly trying to add value back to that relationship and staying in touch. And if you do that consistently over a long enough time period, when opportunities arise, you will be one of the people that those VCs think of um, as someone that they would like to have on their team. Right? It's just adding a lot of value over time. Eventually, they're going to want to respond and add value back to you. So that's what I would do and I'd work on those three things. And then of course, like throughout the process, get experiences that are relevant. So the top most relevant would be obviously working at a venture fund, right? If you can't and you're unable to land an internship at a venture fund, maybe you look at landing a job at some other investment oriented role, and or maybe you pursue internships at startups, particularly things in finance and strategy, because those are the ones that are going to most likely translate the best into working at a venture fund, and get a bunch of experience doing that. So you either go deep with one or two internships and add a ton of value, or you just rack up your resume with lots of logos. But either way, like you want to build up kind of that profile as being somebody that is exceptional at what they do and has been screened and hired by a lot of different people. And if you're doing that consistently and kind of moving up into the right on every subsequent job, right? Like maybe you can't land with a venture fund on your first internship, but maybe you can work at a startup and do something really impactful at that startup. And then maybe you parlay that into getting an internship with the venture fund that invested in that startup, right? And then if you really crush it and you do a great job in that internship with that venture fund, maybe they hire you to come on full time. And I've seen a lot of students like use that exact same playbook as a way to get into a venture fund. To the extent that like I have one friend that went all the way from like intern at like a small company to now he's a managing director of a large fund, and he just kind of worked his way up every step of the way and added a lot of value every step. Or I have another student who called up, he was living in Idaho and there was only one venture fund in Idaho, and he called them up and he was like, I would like to intern. And they were like, we don't have an internship program. And he's like, I will do anything. I will take out the trash. I will work for free. I will like whatever it takes. Please, please, please give me a shot. And he kind of wore them down, and they eventually they're like, fine, you can come in, but we're not paying you. We're not, whatever. He came in and he just worked his butt off. He did all the things that nobody wanted to do, taught himself how to do them and got them done. And by the end of the summer, he had done such a good job that they were like, we don't know how we survived without you before. We want to keep you. And so they brought him, they started paying him, and he worked part-time through the rest of his college career. And then when he graduated, they brought him on full-time. And then just the same thing, he parlayed that into becoming a managing director of Techstars venture fund, and then went off to do kind of some of his own investing and so forth. So like, I think a lot of it is just hard work and hustle and adding value, and people recognize that, right? It's so rare. Like so many people, they just want to show up and be told what to do. But the people that take initiative and kind of go out there and put themselves out there and take some risk are the ones that ultimately land some of the most interesting opportunities.
And like Peter says, one of his interns really just like went to Idaho's only venture fund and said like, "Hey, I'll do whatever." And even though you think you can't add value, like anyone can really add value. Like do the things that people don't want to do. And then, once you step yourself into that door, then make sure that you added enough value where they can't like live without you in a way. And then they're gonna have to bring you on. And that's like the simplest thing about VC is that you really are from day one, you're doing everything. You're just like doing everything and no one's really going to guide you. You have to be, really, really good at learning, really good at talking to people, and just like show that initiative. And that's what it really is. And, for our college students who's watching this, Peter has tons and tons of students. I would think like at least like 300 plus students that went through your program and you've literally trained them. So this 6 month plan, if a college student actually follows it, it's like the best thing ever. Like there's nothing that can get better than this. And there's tons of things that I haven't like thought of that you also mentioned. Is there anything that we didn't talk about, but you still have the thoughts in your mind and you just want to say it?
No, I think it's been good.
Awesome. So for people who want to reach out to you, what is the best place?
Probably the best place is one, I do have a podcast called the Venture Capital Podcast. You can find that at vc.fm. I also have another YouTube channel, which is called VC Pete, where I cover a bunch of other things that are slightly different than the Venture Capital Podcast. It's a lot more educational around specific like topics that are happening in the news, as well as like how to assess, investment opportunities. And then also on LinkedIn, you can find me as well.
And I'll put all his YouTube channels and also his contact info in the description below. Out of everyone you know, who are two amazing VCs that you would recommend as future guests to our podcast?
I would talk to my friend Sean, who I mentioned his career path earlier on the podcast. And I would talk to um, I talked to my one of my former students, David Diver, who's at
Awesome.
New View Capital.
Thank you again, and thanks to everyone who's listening. Comment a question you want to hear from our next guest. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to press the subscribe button, like, and share with someone who's interested in getting into venture. We'll see you next time on Break into VC.